Hi, everyone, wherever you happen to be. This is your host, Mike Hingson, and you are listening to Unstoppable Mindset. We have a saying here, Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And we're going to definitely have unexpected today. This is also going to be a very fun episode. By the time you hear this, you will have heard a couple of conversations that I had with Walden Hughes, who is the president of the Radio Enthusiasts of Puget Sound, and he's also on the on other boards dealing with old radio show. And he introduced me to Bill Johnson, who is a person that is well known for taking on the role of Bob Hope. And I'm sure that we're going to hear a bunch about that as we go forward here. But Bill is our guest today, and I just played a little segment of something for Bill with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, two characters by any standard. Well, anyway, we'll get to all of that. Bill, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset. I'm really honored that you're here with us today.
Oh, thanks a million, Michael. It's such a pleasure to be here. This is
Well,
going to be a fun discussion.
oh, I think so. I think absolutely by any standard, it'll be fun. Well, why don't we start before it gets too fun with some of the early stories about Bill growing up and all that. Tell us about the early Bill.
Okay, well, I was born and raised in Wichita, Kansas, of all places. Um, and I used to say, I used to marvel watching Hope's Christmas specials with my family. That sort of spurred my interest. But grew up in the Midwest, went to Wichita State University, and then uh, after graduation, I had a job with an independent film company, and I moved to Los Angeles seeking my fortune. Well, the film company folded in 3 months, as those things do. And so I was left with I guess, my pursuit of the entertainment career from there.
Hmm. So did you, what you went to school and high school and all that stuff?
Yes. Oh, yes. I went to Wichita East High. Um, I didn't graduate with honors, but I graduated with a B
Well,
average.
that's fair. B
Uh,
for Bob Hope, right?
yeah,
But yeah.
that. And then I actually went to college under a theater scholarship. Um,
Wow.
and so that in those days, that would pay for everything, books, class, which delighted my parents because we were a family of simple means. So that was the only way I was going to go to college was having a scholarship. And but as it turns out, it was 4 of the best years of my humble life because I got a lot of hands-on experience in Wichita State's a medium-sized college,
Yeah.
but back then it was much uh, smaller, so I had a lot of opportunity.
I've actually been to Wichita State. I've been to Wichita
Oh,
and
great!
did some speaking back there, and we're probably going to be doing more in the future. But it's a nice town. It's a great town to be a part of, I think.
Yes, and people are so nice there. And what I've noticed, uh, living in other places and then going home to visit, Wichita's a clean town. Just something you notice. The streets are usually pretty clean, and the foliage is well manicured. So hats off to the city for keeping the place up to date or keeping
S-
it clean anyway.
Well, yeah, you got to do what you got to do, and that's a good
Amen.
thing. And in the winter, everything gets covered up by the snow.
Yes, you do get all 4 seasons in Wichita,
Yeah.
whether you like it or not.
See, there
But
you go.
it's one of those places where they have that saying: if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes and it'll change.
Yeah.
So
So there. So you majored in theater in college?
yes, I did. Actually, the official designation at Wichita State was speech communication.
Ah.
That's what I got my Bachelor of Arts degree in.
So
And
what years were you there?
I was there in the fall of 75 and graduated a semester late. So I graduated in December of 79.
Okay.
So if
So
you do the
that
math,
yeah. But that was after basically the traditional golden days and golden age of radio, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Still in the
So,
days of black and white television, but
yeah, there was a lot of
after,
black and white television, and there were some resurgence of radio. Radio Mystery Theater, CBS was on, um, and I think that was before. Well, no, maybe later in 78, 79. I don't know when it was, but NPR did Star Wars, and so there were some
yes.
radio things, which was pretty good.
And I think our friends in Lake Wobegon began in those
Oh yeah, they
days.
were in I think 71. Garrison Keeler.
Okay.
It's a
And
quiet week in Lake Wobegon, my hometown. I know. I listened every week.
oh, I did too. So my interest in radio was, I think, started back then.
Yeah, I enjoyed him every week as I love to describe him. He clearly was the modern Mark Twain of the United States and radio for that matter.
Is that right? Oh gosh, yeah,
That's what I
yeah.
always thought.
Well, yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. And a lot of that wasn't it improvised. His weekly monologue, he'd have
Oh,
an
sure.
idea, and then
He had ideas. He may have had a couple notes, but primarily it was improvised. He just did it.
he just did it. I love some of the episodes. You take a lot of find a lot of humor in the fact he's kind of pleased with himself at the end. He goes, "Well, look what we just said," or something. He'll
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, it was fun. So what did you do after college?
Well, after college, when I had moved to Los Angeles, after that did not work out, I pursued my living as an actor, which didn't last long. So I, of course, had to get a secondary job. I guess let me back up. It did last long, although I didn't have enough to pay my bills.
Oh,
So
well, there you go.
I had a secondary job as whatever I could find, bartending. Usually, I did a lot of work as a bartender, and but you get at least doing something like that, you get to people watch.
Yeah.
So and
And
just
that's always entertaining, isn't it?
well, it can be.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true.
Back in that's where I kind of you develop your little shtick you do for customers to get them to laugh and maybe tip you. My big thing was that you'd always see a couple, say, making out at the bar because it was kind of dark in there, and I would always say, "Hey, fellas, you want to meet my wife, Carol?" Oh, that's her boss. Don't worry about it. They're having a good time, or or something like that, just to uh, try to get a few laughs.
I've done similar things at airports. I know that the TSA agents have such a thankless job. And one of the things I decided fairly early on after September 11th,
Mhm.
and we got out, and most people
Yes.
and most of the TSA people don't know it. But anyway, whenever I go through the airport, I love to try to make them laugh. So they'll say things like, "Well, I need to see your ID, please," and I'll say things like, "Well, why did you lose yours?" Or
Ah, good line.
or why do you want to see it? It's just a piece of paper, right? But and I get them to laugh mostly. There are a few that don't, but mostly they do. And then the other thing
Uh-huh.
is, of course, going through with my guide dog, and we go through the portal. They have to search the dog because he's got the metal harness on that always sets off the detector.
Oh my, yeah.
And so they say, well, we're going to have to pet your dog. And I said, well, just wait a minute. There's something you need to know. And I really sound very serious when I do this. You've got to understand this before you do that. And they go, oh yeah. And they back up. And I go, he only likes long searches. If you don't take a half hour, he's not happy. Because his tail's going 500 miles a second,
Oh,
he
great.
knows what's
Yeah.
coming. But it is fun. And we get him to laugh, which is, I think, important to do. We don't laugh at enough in life anyway.
Amen to that. That's my philosophy as well, my friend. And there's not a lot to laugh about these days. And hopefully we can find the humor, even if we create it ourselves.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to laugh at if we find it. There are a lot of things that are not going very well right now, and there are are way too many things that make it hard to laugh, but we can find things if we work at it.
Amen.
Um, I wish more people would do that than some of the things that they do, but what do you do?
Yes. Yeah. From your mouth to God's ears, that's a great plan for the future.
Well, we try. So you did some acting and you had all sorts of other jobs, and then what happened?
Well, I finally got fed up with the whole bartending thing and the rat race of trying to make it in Los Angeles. I did some commercials. I had a couple of small roles in some independent movies, as they say. But my first love being theater, I hit the road again to do
Mm.
some regional theater shows, uh, to where I finally ended up uh, back in Kansas once again. There was a dinner theater in my hometown of Wichita, and I got hired to do shows there.
Oh,
So eventually becoming a resident director. So uh, and my family was going through some challenges at the time, so it was good to be home.
mm-hmm.
So I hadn't really abandoned the dream. I just refocused it.
Mm-hmm.
So and I got a lot of great experience directing plays, appearing in plays, and I met my wife there. Um, so that was a win-win on all counts.
I first got exposed to dinner theater after college. I was in Iowa in Des Moines, and
Okay.
the person who was reading the national magazine for the National Federation of the Blind, the magazine called the Braille Monitor, the guy was Larry McKeever, was, I think, owner of and very involved in a dinner theater called Charlie's Showplace. And I don't remember the history, um, but I went to several of the performances. And then he actually tried to create a serial to go on radio.
Oh, good.
And it didn't get very far,
Oh,
but
I see.
it would have been fun if he had been able to do more with it. But he did do, and there were people there who did the dinner theater, and that was a lot of fun.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Although I must say that I was sort of the black sheep of the family, being in the arts. My mom and dad came from rural communities, and so they didn't really understand this entertainment business
Mm.
thing. So that was always a challenge. But there's one footnote that I'm kind of proud of. My grandfather, who was a farmer all his life, he lived on a farm. He was raised on a farm. Every year at the 4th of July co-op picnic, the co-op was a place where they would take the crops and get paid and uh, get supplies and so forth. They would have a picnic for all the people that uh, were their customers. Every year, he would supposedly play the unscrupulous egg buyer or the egg salesman. And so he'd go to the routine was an old vaudeville routine.
Mm.
He'd go to this poor farmer and say, "Here, let me pay you for those eggs. That's here. There's one, two. Say, how many kids do you guys have now? Four? No, five, six, seven, eight. Say, how long have you and your wife been married? What is it? 7 years? Eight?" The guy go, "No, 10, 11, 12." So that was the bit. And he would do it every year because I guess he did it really well.
Drove the farmers crazy.
Yeah. So humble beginnings in
That's
the
cool.
lineage.
But
So
on the other hand, once you started doing that, at least being in the theater was enough to pay the bills.
yes. So my parents really couldn't complain about that.
Well, see, it worked out.
Yes, indeed. And I met my wife, so I'm not complaining about any of it.
Now, was she in the theater?
Yes, she was a
Oh,
performer.
ah,
We met in a show called Lend Me a Tenor, and she was the lead, and I was at this point doing my uh, stage management duties. But suffice to say, we have gone on and done many shows together since then, and even had been able to play opposite each other a couple of times. So
oh,
that,
cool.
yeah, that's a you can't ask for better memories than that.
No, and you guys certainly knew each other and know each other well, so that worked out really well.
Yeah, that works out pretty good, except, sometimes you have to have a conversation and say, okay, we're just going to leave the theater on the stage,
Yeah,
and at home, we're at home.
yeah. Well, yeah, there is that, but it's okay. So, how did you get into the whole process of portraying Bob Hope, for example? And did you do anything before Bob of the same sort of thing?
Well, interestingly enough, to complete the whole circle of my experience, when I was performing in Wichita, I got a job opportunity here in I'm living in Las Vegas now, to move out here and audition or to come out and audition for a new dinner show that was opening
Mm,
at Caesar's Palace. It was called Caesar's Magical Empire. And it was it was in 1996. And during that time, there was this big magic craze in Las Vegas. Everybody
hmm.
was doing magic shows.
Well, yeah,
Siegfried,
you had Siegfried and Roy and
yeah. So I came out, I auditioned and got hired. And so then it was like, well, now you got to move.
yeah.
So we moved on just on a hope and a prayer. And luckily, they eventually hired my wife. And so we got to work together there. And I eventually went on to become what they called the show director. I didn't do the original show direction, but it was my job to maintain the integrity of the attraction.
Mm.
So during those years, that was kind of difficult because you have to listen to being on the administrative team. You've got to listen to all the conflict that's going on as well
Yeah.
as and try to keep the waters calm.
Keep peace.
Yes. So anyway, doing my show and being interactive, you talk back and forth to the audience, and after it was over, you take them out to the next experience in their night when they would go see magic in a big showroom. And a lady came up to me and she said, "Say, I've got this World War II reunion coming up next month. I'd like you to come and pretend to be Bob Hope. Do you know who that is?" And I was like, "Yes, he's one of my heroes." And so that was the first opportunity. Uh, Suffice to say, I guess should have prefaced it by saying when the Magical Empire first opened, we were all playing these mystical wizards,
Mm.
and dark characters. Well, that didn't fly. That wasn't any fun. So then
No.
the directors, the producers said, "Well, everybody come up with your own character, and we'll go from there." And so I created this character named the Stradivarius because I like to fiddle around.
I get it.
And but
Cute.
I played it like
And,
Bob
and,
Hope.
and you like to string people along. But anyway, go ahead.
Hey, I wish I would have thought of that. My approach was like Bob Hope in one of the road pictures. So the show would be sort of a fish out of water type thing. Come on, folks! I laughed when you came in. That type of thing.
Yeah.
So when this lady saw the show, that's how she got that inspiration.
Well, your voice is close enough to his that I could see that anyway.
Oh, well, thank you. Sometimes I'd say it drives my wife nuts because I'll come across an old archival material and say, "Hey, honey, how about this one?" So she's got to be the first audience.
Well, I'm prejudiced, so you could tell her I said so.
Okay. You'd love to hear it, right?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Well, so you went off and you did the World War II event.
Did the World War II event shortly after that. This well, I should tell you another story that uh, shortly after that, a young man came to my show, and uh, during the show, he stopped me and said, "Say, you remind me of someone very dear to me. Have you ever heard of Bob Hope?" And I said, "Yeah, he's," again, I said, "one of my heroes." The guy said, "Well, you kind of remind me of him." Went on his merry way. and I didn't think much of it. Well, it just so happens the next day I was watching the biography uh, documentary of Bob Hope. And all of a sudden, this talking head comes up, and it's the same guy I was just talking to in my show
Hmm.
the day before. It turns out that was Bob's adopted son, Tony Hope. So I took that as a positive sign
Yeah.
that maybe I was doing something similar to Mr. Hope anyway. But then, as I said, the show closed very soon after that. Uh, Sadly, Mr. Hope passed away in 2003,
Right.
and so there was no real demand for anything like that. But I didn't let the idea go. I wanted something to do creatively. Um, I continued to work for the same company, but I went over and ran the 3D movie at Eminem's World in Las Vegas for 20
Ah,
years. So I had plenty of time to think about doing something creative.
and you got some M&Ms along the way.
They keep them in the break room for the employees, so it's like here's all the different brand. I mean, here's all the different flavors and
Yeah.
styles. So to have a way, and you can tell guests, oh yeah, that's delicious. It tastes like just like almonds or something.
Yeah.
So based on that, I decided to pursue uh, this tribute, and I'll tell you, it's difficult getting started at first. You got to practically pay people to let you come and do a show. I'd go to retirement homes and say, "Hey, you want a show today?" Sometimes they'd let me, sometimes they wouldn't. Uh, but the thing about doing a show at a retirement community is they will be very honest with you.
Hmm.
Yeah, if you ain't any good, they'll say, "Nah, no thanks. Nice try." So I knew where my trouble spots were.
But audiences don't treat you as the enemy. And I know that one of the things I hear regularly is, well, how do you speak so much and so well? One of the greatest fears that we all have is of public speaking. And one of the things that I constantly tell people is think about the audiences. They want you to succeed. They came because they want to hear you succeed, and you need to learn how to relate to them. But they're not out to get you. They want you to be successful, and they love it when you are. And I learned that very early on. And speaking has never been something that I've been afraid of. And I think it's so important that people recognize that the audiences want you to succeed anyway.
That's so true. And you kind of touched on a quote. I remember one of the books from Bob Hopes. He said how he approaches it. He said, I consider the audience as my best friends. And who
Yeah,
doesn't want to spend time with your best friend?
right. And I believe that when I speak, I don't talk to an audience, I talk with the audience. And I will try to do some things to get them to react. And a lot of it is when I'm telling a story, I've learned to know how well I'm connecting by how the audience reacts, whether there's intakes of breath or they're just very silent or whatever. And I think that's so important. But he's absolutely right. Who wouldn't want to spend time with your best friend?
Yes. Amen
Now,
to that.
did you ever get to meet Bob Hope?
I never did.
Mm.
Although at one point in my when I was living in Los Angeles, a friend of mine and I, we were over the San Fernando Valley, and they said, "Hey, I think there's some stars' homes near here. Let's see if we can find them." And we said, "I think Bob Hope lives on this street." So we went down Moore Park Avenue um, in Toluca Lake, and we finally saw this home with a giant H on the
Ah,
gate. And it's like, oh, I wonder, this has got to be it. Well, all of a sudden, these gates began to open. And we kind of, my friend and I were like, "Ooh," and here Hope came driving home. He arrived home in a very nicely appointed Chrysler Cordoba.
mm,
Remember those?
mm-hmm.
And
My wife had one.
he just was just scowling at us like, "What are you doing in my life?" And he drove it. So that's as close as I got to the real guy. But I wish I could have had the pleasure of seeing him in person, but never was fortunate enough.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's interesting is, uh, like with the World Trade Center, and I've realized over the past few years, we're in a world with a whole generation that has absolutely no direct memory of the World Trade Center because they weren't born or they were too young to remember. And that goes even further back for Bob Hope. How does that work? Do you find that you're able to connect with younger audiences? Do they talk with, do they react? Do they love it? How does that go?
Well, interestingly enough, a lot of times if there are younger people at shows, they're usually dragged there by their parents.
Uh-huh.
Like, and I have found that they will start chuckling and giggling and laughing in spite of themselves because that old humor of Hope's, that granted it is corny, but there's some great material there if presented in the proper context.
Yeah.
Uh, I was funny story. I was doing a show at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. They were dedicating a new theater or something, and the color guard was a group of local Marines that were serving in a local base, and they were standing there right before they went on. And this young man kept looking at me, and finally he said, very respectfully, he said, "I'm sorry, sir, but who are you?" So I said, luckily there was a picture of Bob Hope on the wall. And I said, well, I'm trying to be that guy. And I said, hang around a little bit, you'll hear some of the material. So, but that's the thing. That you did bring up an interesting point, is how to keep your audience, I guess, interested, even though the humor is 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. Um, I call it, I call my approach history with humor.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I did the Bob Hope, or as in the natural progression of things, I went to an open call eventually here in Vegas to do, they were looking for impersonators for an afternoon show at the Riviera in a place called Pennytown. It was just a place for penny slots. And
Oh.
they hired me. They said, you can do your Bob Hope impression there. And so they had a stage that was on a 1 foot riser. You had a microphone and a speaker and a sound man. And you had to do a 10-minute monologue 6 times a day.
Ooh.
Do 10 minutes. You'd have about a 40-minute break, do 10 more. And I didn't do it every day, but you would be scheduled. Maybe they'd have, have a Reba McEntire one day. They'd have an Elvis one day. Well, so it was a great place to try your act because, and that's what turned me on to the whole idea of history with humor. Because when I started, I was just doing some of his material I'd found in a Hope joke book that I thought were funny. Well, once in a while, people would be playing the slots. Granted, they were looking at the machines. Nobody was looking at me. And once in a while, you'd have somebody go, ha, crank the one arm bandit again. And then, or I'd make the sound man laugh. And that was my goal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a snack bar right in front of us with a rail that they weren't tables, but you could go lean against the rail and eat I think it was called Moondoggy's hot dog stand. So you
Ah.
could eat your hot dog and watch Bob Hope. So if I could make the Moondoggy people, hot dog folks, choke on their hot dog while they were laughing, that was like a home run.
Yeah.
But to keep them interested, tell them something that they will know. So,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, Hope's first show for the troops was May 6, 1941, down in Marchfield in Riverside, California.
Mm-hmm.
And you start giving dates and specifics that I can see the people in the audience go, oh, yeah. In their mind's eye, if they were around then, they will go back to that day. What was I doing then? Okay. And so you kind of make the world relevant for them. So that's how I approach World War II, Korea, and Vietnam is give dates and places, which you got to be accurate because the veterans will set you straight on that
Oh,
too.
yeah, because they do remember.
Oh yes, they were there. So some of them, and but it's amazing as you say. You can tell if the audience is engaged by if they inhale or if they make some complimentary noises during the
Right.
show. Sometimes I'll get fellas who will sit there and ponder, just looking at me, and then they'll come up afterwards and say, "Man, I hadn't thought about that in years.
Yeah.
Thank you." Or
And you know you're connecting. Yeah.
yeah, and because Hope represented, I think, a good memory in a kind of a rough time for a lot of folks.
Well, he did. He did so much for the troops with the military, and as you said, May 6, 1941, and it went from there. And
Yes.
of course, during the whole war, he was all over and entertaining people. And he was also very active in radio as part of all that.
Oh my goodness. I don't know how the man found time to sleep
Yeah.
because if he were alive today, he would love social media and podcasts and things because he was always trying to get his name in the paper or get some publicity, but he never forgot about his audience. He would want to do a show for the troops no matter where they were stationed, or he'd said, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror um, if I didn't try.
Yeah. Well, you do a lot with veterans and so on. So you've kind of kept up that tradition, haven't you?
Yes, have been fortunate enough to play a lot of reunions and some maybe some USO themed shows because that first show he did, Hope did in May of 1941, was they just it was a radio show that his one of his writers had a brother stationed in Riverside, California, and the war hadn't started, so they had nothing to do.
Right.
These guys were bored, and so he said, "Let's take our show down there." And Hope didn't want to leave the comfort of his NBC studio. It's like, what's the idea? And he said, "How big's the crowd?" And they said, "Well, I don't know, maybe 1,000." And of course, 1,000 people. And in Hope's mind, he says, I'd I'd give my arm and a leg to hear 10 people laugh. 100 people's like a symphony, but 1,000 people,
Yeah.
sheer fantasy. So he said, "Oh, wait a minute, are you 1,000 people? Are you sure?" And this guy, Al Capstaff, said, "Well, maybe two." So that was it. And they went down, and when the audience, of course, they were just hungry for anything. The response was just so great that Hope said, "Well, where has this been?" And he said shortly after that, we teamed up with the USO and been going steady ever since.
Yeah. And that's so cool. And again, you've kept a lot of that going too. Now, um, we've talked on this show with Walden about reps and the showcase and so on. Are you going to be up at the recreation in Washington in September?
Yes, I am. I'll be there, and I believe we're doing one of the Cavalcade of America shows that sort of incorporates a lot of his initial, uh, one of his initial tours over in World War II. But it's because a cavalcade is a recreation. A lot of it's dramatized, but it's encapsulated. You go bang 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 across uh, a big section of World War II and Hope's experience in Europe. But
Yeah.
it's, to me, as a fan of that genre, it's fascinating. So I'm just looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, we ought to, one of these days, we need to just do a Bob Hope radio show or something like that and get you to come on and get an audience and just do a show.
Oh, that would be great. I
Wouldn't that
would
be
love
fun?
it.
Wouldn't
That
that
would
be
be
fun?
fun.
I'm
That would be great. And,
uh,
and if there's any naysayers, you just say, they say, why do you want to do radio? So, well, as Hope would say, radio is just TV without the eye strain.
yeah.
So,
And the reality, I'm one of my favorite characters and one of my favorite shows is Richard Diamond, Private Detective. And I was originally going to actually be at the showcase doing Richard Diamond, but I've
oh,
got a speaking engagement, so I won't be able to be there this time. So we'll do it another time.
oh,
But I
sure.
remember, at the beginning of every show, the first thing that would happen is that the phone would ring and he would answer it and say something cute. And it was usually his girlfriend, Helen Asher, who was played by Virginia, or who was, yeah, played by Virginia Gregg. And one of his shows started, the phone rang, he picked it up. Diamond Detective Agency, we can solve any crime except television.
That's great.
I love that one. I love to use that.
I got to remember that. That's a great line.
Yeah, but it's really fun. Well, so you classify yourself as a tribute artist. How do you really get started in doing that, and how do you keep that going?
Well, that's the $1 million question. Basically, I found all the archival material I could find, um, and there's a ton of information on Bob Hope on YouTube
Yeah.
nowadays. Um, and you need to decide: are you a tribute or are you an impersonator? Because there is a slight difference. I
And
found
what's the
out.
difference?
A tribute, well, first off, an impersonator is someone who resembles someone famous and dresses up in a manner as to portray them. And that can include a tribute artist who may not look identical to the person, but can capture a mannerism or a vocal vocal rhythm to suggest enough that the audience will accept it.
Mm-hmm.
So I I do a I am I feel like I can capture a little bit of his face with some you know some of the expressions. People have told me my eyes resemble his, as well as wear a hat or something from try to copy a costume from a picture that is very uh, you feel like is iconic of this character. So if you can come out and present that, that's the battle. Um, Hope would always, he began his radio shows, as you recall, by saying where he was. And like, how do you do, ladies and gentlemen? This is Bob live from Santa Ana Air Base, Hope. And then do a two line rhyme about his sponsor, usually Pepsodent, just to get on to start the show with a laugh. Like
Yeah.
put Pepsodent on your brush and use plenty of traction, and none of your teeth will be missing in action.
Yeah. Cute.
but you if, to to pursue it, as I said, you've got to kind of forage out in the real world and see somebody's looking for a show, and hopefully get someone to take a chance, give you an opportunity. That's why I went to that open call to do that show at the Riviera. It is difficult to tell jokes at people that are chewing at you, but it's a good learning ground. Plus, doing the shows at the retirement homes made you prepared for anything. But I found that I got the strongest response from veterans. You
Mm.
mentioned some of those historical moments, and so I thought maybe I'll just focus on this, and not to put the other comedy and the other experiences are very important too. But the things I have found people remember the most were those shows for the troops.
Yeah.
Uh, Basically, in a nutshell, and they don't remember I said, well, what did he say? Do you remember a joke? Sometimes they'll tell me a joke, but most times they don't remember what he said, but they remember how he made them feel.
Yeah. And the fact that he said it.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a common joke I'd heard for years, and a friend of mine told me he was a 10-year-old kid at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and Hope came out and told a joke. The guy goes into a bar. Oh no, excuse me. Let me back up. A grasshopper goes into a bar. The bartender says, "Hey, we got a drink named after you." The grasshopper says, "You got a drink named Irving?"
Cute.
And I'd heard that for years, but
Yeah.
I guess Hope told it. And uh, so you never know what inspires your comedy, but there's a lot of common things I heard growing up that I will find Hope said it at one point or another in his either his radio show or on one of his specials. So,
Do you think that a lot of what he did was ad lib, or do you think that it was mostly all written and he just went from a
well,
script?
that's a good point. He was one of the first performers to use cue cards,
Okay.
um, and a lot of it was written. But from what I've read, is that he was also very fast on his feet
That's what I
because
thought.
if something happened, he would come in with a bang with another line to top it.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about that command performance with Lana Turner that he said she said, well, they've been looking at Ham all night and you're still here. Ah, big laugh, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
And he said, now I'm bacon
Oh,
with the double entendre, like
yeah.
you burn me, whatever. But uh, I thought that was clever.
Cute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cute.
And he is clearly there had to be a whole lot more to him than writing. And so I absolutely am convinced that there was a lot of ad libbing and there was just he was fast. He was good at it. And the more he got comfortable because of those big crowds that got him started, the better he became.
Absolutely. There's a great book by, I don't know, do you know Bob Mills? He was one of Bob Hope's writers, wrote a book,
Right.
and he explains the formula behind a lot of their jokes. Situation, um, and then it would have a payoff, like, I don't know what happened, but now da da, this is
Yeah.
a setup that a setup and then the joke. Hope supposedly liked an economy of dialogue. He didn't like a lot of language going from point A to point B
Mm-hmm.
to tell his joke. That's why
No.
the rapid fire delivery, and he had a lot of jokes in his shows. The radio shows had at least was it something like 10 jokes a minute at
Oh,
the
they were very fast, and there were we've got a few rehearsals of Bob Hope shows, and clearly some of the things that he did because at first he wasn't getting the reaction that he thought he was going to get, but he pulled it out, and again, it's all because he was fast. He was good.
yeah. Or I've got some blooper reels from some of the Christmas specials, and he'll try and try and try, and then finally he'll say, "Take that card and tear it up, throw it away," and that's funnier than the joke itself.
Yeah. Then the joke itself. It's really
So,
cute. So, you obviously like performing. Does that run in your family?
well, not necessarily. As I said, I'm kind of the black sheep of the family because I was in the arts. They would rather have a more, what do I want to say, a more safe
Mm,
a career choice because entertaining, you're always wondering, well, where's my next job?
yeah.
As opposed to something else where you might have a better idea of where your next paycheck's coming. But I do have always had a day job, and this is sort of like my way to flex those creative muscles.
Mm. So, what's
Um,
your day job today?
my day job is I still do technical support for the good folks at Eminem's World on the Strip.
Oh,
Only they after COVID happened, they closed the 3D movie that I was
yeah.
overseeing. And another fellow and I do tech support. We just basically make sure the lights come on. And as well as I have a job at the College of Southern Nevada on the support staff, trying to help folks who have English as a second language get a job. So uh, I
Well,
find those are both rewarding challenges.
it's a good thing I don't go to M&M's World because I don't really care if the lights are on or not.
Oh, well, there you go. we need we need somebody here doing rim shots.
Yeah, you light dependent people are all alike. You got to have all those lights.
Yes.
I'm
Well,
trying to remember. I don't know that I've been to M&M's World. I've been to the M&M store in New York City, but I don't think I've been to the
okay.
one in Las Vegas.
I was actually at the opening of that M&M store in New York City.
Mm,
Funny story. They have people that put on the character suits,
right.
and when I was there to help them kind of uh, get acclimated to wearing those suits and appearing in front of people. Well, the kids were doing around say 2 in the afternoon. Well, the New York Times showed up at noon wanting a
Oh,
pic. They wanted a picture and so I had to put on the I was yellow, the peanut, and this other person that was there put on the red suit, and we walked down on 46th Street and started walking on the street waving and carrying on. I thought, here I am. I finally made it to Broadway,
yeah.
and I'm dressed as a nut. So
And you had Hershey right across the street.
right across the street. So I don't know. I imagine Hershey's still. They're probably still going head to head to this
The
day.
last time I heard they were.
So
I
well,
don't
more
know. I don't know whether anything really changed with COVID, but the last I heard they were.
well, more power to them.
Yeah.
But funny story. Mm.
Well, so will you travel basically anywhere to do a show? Are there any limits or?
No, I'll go anywhere. This tribute has taken me as far as Tokyo, Japan, for the USO there. Um, uh, I've done shows in the Pacific and Guam. Uh, I'm not too sure I want to travel internationally these days, but if somebody has an opportunity, I'll think about it. Funny thing happened at that show I did in Tokyo. It was it was a gala for the local USO to
Oh,
honor the troops who were serving in that area. So they had a representative from each branch that was serving, Navy, Marines, and the Japan nation of Japan now has what they call the civil defense group. I believe that's what they call it. Because after World War II, they signed that document saying they would not have an organized military, but
right.
they have their civil defense, and so we were honoring them. There was a group, an Andrew Sisters trio performing, singing and dancing,
Mm.
and I was standing off stage just waiting to go on and finish the show. And this has been 20 years ago. Let me preface that. This older Japanese gentleman came up to me and he said, "I would like to make a toast." And there was a lady in charge who, this was there was some admirals there and leaders of the Seventh Fleet were there, so everything had to be approved. Everything went according to schedule. The military events are just boom, boom, boom. And so I said, "Well, okay, I need to ask Judy when this Judy was in charge when we can do this." And he just said, I want to make a toast." And I said, "Oh, okay, but I have to clear it with Judy." Well, I finally got Judy and said, "That older Japanese man would like to make a toast." And she said, "Yes, let him do whatever he wants." Turns out he was an admiral in the Japanese Navy
Oh,
during World War II. And he was attending the event uh, here, although these many years later, just as,
as
uh,
everyone else was.
sure. So to bail myself out of it, I went back on said stage and said, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, our honored guest would like to make a toast." And he, of course, I can't remember the toast, but at the time, I thought that was very sweet and very eloquent.
Hmm.
So it's just these incredible little uh, snippets of life you go through. It's like, how could I ever know when I was a 5-year old kid in Kansas that one day I'd be chatting with a World War II admiral from the Japanese Navy?
Right.
It's it's just mind boggling.
So I'm curious, Bob Hope. copyrighted a lot of his jokes. Are you able to still use them?
Well, that's a good question. Yes, he did. He copyrighted his jokes and everything. However, and I have spoken to the lawyer for the Hope Estate. Uh, there are the what do you call? Oh, that it just flew out of my head. The laws surrounding intellectual properties.
Copyright laws and intellectual property and public domain. Yeah.
Yeah, um, the song "Thanks for the Memory" is in public domain. And Hope would always change the lyrics to wherever
Yeah.
he went because he hated the song,
Yeah.
supposedly. He had, how did I get hung with that old dog of a song?
Yeah. Well, he
So,
kept using it every week. So I can't believe he was too anti-song.
yeah, that's true. But the Hope Estate did copyright his jokes, but as long as I don't write a book and try to sell them as my jokes, I should be fine, as well as I am allowed you those laws allow you to impersonate someone, no matter who it is. You could impersonate your next door neighbor, even though he's not famous, as long as you do not do something to harm them
Yeah.
or represent it in an unflattering way.
Well, and clearly what you're doing is pretty obvious to anyone who knows at all that it's Bob Hope and that you're trying to do a tribute to him. So I would think it would make sense that that would work.
Well, it should, and but the final caveat is that a reasonable person must come away from the show knowing full well they did not see the original. You must tell them. And Bob Hope's been gone for many
Well,
years.
yeah, 22 years now.
So that's usually not a problem, but that's how I finish my tribute is by saying, is I usually wear a hat to complete the illusion with the bill flipped up. I'll take the hat off and say, now, if I could break character and tell about how Hope was named an honorary veteran.
Hmm.
And at the age of 94, it was an amendment passed by Congress designated him as an honorary veteran. And it was received unanimous bipartisan support.
As it should.
Yes. And Hope went on to say, he said, of all the awards I've received in my lifetime,
Hmm.
being listed among the men and women I admire the most, this is my greatest honor. So that's a good way for me to wrap up my tributes whenever possible.
Do you
But
have, oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, there's another funny story. You know, Hope lived to be 100,
Yeah.
and George Burns, he
George Burns lived to be 100.
lived to be 100. Supposedly, the two of them had a bet as to who would live the longest.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, what were the stakes and how do you collect?
Yeah.
Because some guy, you're not going to be there. But in any event, George Burns was born in the 1890s. And so he was older than Hope. Hope was born in 1903. George Burns lived to be 100 years and 10 days old. Bob Hope lived to be 100 years and 59 days old.
Oh,
So Hope, well, the story goes that, and in his final months, he was pretty much bedridden
yeah.
and slept a lot. His wife Dolores went to his bedside
Hmm.
at that 100 years 10-day mark, and she said, "Well, Bob, you won the bet. You have now lived longer than George Burns." And supposedly, even though he was fast, it was like they thought he was asleep. This huge smile just curled up his lips.
Hmm.
So he heard. So there
That's
you go.
great. That's great. Well, if you have, do you have something that you could do for us, or do you have something that you could play, or something that would give us just a little flavor?
Yeah, I would tell your listeners that they want to catch a little bit more, they can go to my website, BillJohnsonEntertainment.com, and
Okay.
there's some video clips there. But what I like to do is that Hope would always uh, he would always joke about traveling to the event, and that's how I like to begin my shows, with him arriving. It's a says, I just flew in on a wing and a prayer. I was on the wing because as a soldier, I wouldn't have a prayer. Actually, my flight was very nice, but the plane was rather old. In fact, the pilot sat behind me wearing goggles and a scarf. This plane was so old that Lindbergh's lunch was still on the seat. The fasten seatbelt sign was in Latin. To get to the washroom, you had to crawl out on the wing. Come on, folks, I said to get to the washroom, you had to crawl out on the wing. But hey, I don't know about you, but I have a fear of flying that dates back to my childhood. See, when I was a baby being delivered by the stork, that blasted bird dropped me from 400 feet. Yeah, he did that to stay out of the range of my father's shotgun. See, Dad already had my brothers, Eenie, Meenie, and Miney. When I came along, he didn't want no moat. So
I get
it,
it.
just it goes along in those words,
Well,
or those terms, rather.
we are definitely going to have to just work out doing a radio show and getting you to do a whole show, and we'll have to get some other people to go along with it. We'll figure it out.
Oh, that sounds great.
I think it'd be
I
a lot
love
of
it.
fun to do.
Count me in.
Well, I want to thank you for being here. This has been absolutely wonderful to be able to talk about Bob Hope and to talk about you, even more important.
Well, that's very kind.
I'm sure that Bob Hope is monitoring from somewhere, but by the same token, you're here and we're here, so we do get to talk about you, which is important to do as well.
Well, that's very kind, Michael. I was hopeful that you would be at the reps. Uh,
I was planning on it because I want to really do the Richard Diamond show. I'll I told you I'd send you the command performance that we talked about. Dick Tracy and B flat, or for goodness sakes, is he ever going to marry Tess Trueheart?
oh, yes.
And I'll also send you the Richard Diamond that we're going to do the next time I'm able to be at the rep show. It's really hilarious.
Oh, that sounds great.
But I want to thank you for being here once again. Tell us your website.
My website is it's my name and followed by entertain BillJohnsonEntertainment.com. There's some video clips there and some great pictures of some of the folks I've had the pleasure of meeting and performing with. Uh, I don't want to name drop, but just to give the act a little more credence, pictures with Les Brown Jr.,
Mm.
rest his soul. I did it was I floored. I was able to do a show with Lee Greenwood on the island of Maui,
Wow.
uh, as well as perform with Wayne Newton at Fort Hood, Texas. Wayne Newton actually took over for Bob Hope with the USO when Bob just got too old to travel.
Yeah.
So that's just for a humble guy. It's some incredible stories.
Well, and you're keeping some wonderful memories alive, and we'll definitely have to do something with that. But I want to
Well,
thank you for being here. And again, BillJohnsonEntertainment.com. So go check it out, folks. And um, and there's a lot of old radio out there online. We've talked about yesterdayusa.com or yesterdayusa.net. They're the same. You can listen, you can go to Reps Online, REPS Online, and listen to a lot of radio programs there. There are a number of people. We've had Carl Amari on, who several years ago did complete redos of all of the Twilight Zone, and he made them scripts for
oh
radio,
my!
which was a lot of fun. Have you ever heard any of those?
I've never heard. I was a big fan of the show when it was on TV, but I've never heard any of the radio.
Stacy Keach Jr. is the Rod Serling character, but oh yeah, Twilight
Oh,
Zone Radio
that's
dot
great.
com.
That's great. I will check it out.
Or we'll send you some.
That's even better.
But I want to thank you for being here and thank you all for being here with us. I hope you had fun today. It's a little bit different than some of the things that we've done on the podcast, but I think it makes it all the more fun. So thanks for being here. Please let us know what you think. Email me. I'd love to hear from you. Michael, Michaelhi, at accessibe.com. Love to get your thoughts wherever you're listening. Please give us a 5-star review. We appreciate those a lot. Tell other people about the podcast. We really would like to get as many people listening as we can, and we want to be sure to do the kinds of things you want on the podcast. So if you know anyone else who ought to be on the podcast, Bill, that goes for you as well. Please introduce us. We're always looking for more people to come on Unstoppable Mindset that we get a chance to chat with. So hope that you'll all do that. And again, Bill, I want to thank you one more time for being here. This has been
I,
fun.
this has been a blast. Michael, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.